All right. Well, here we are, the very first podcast of what is going to be called either the Duff Daddy Podcast, the Duff Daddy Experience, something along those lines. And I am joined by one of my best friends here. This is Gabriella Espinoza. She's a legend in the Boulder community. She is. She's a fantastic dancer, drummer, scholar of Eastern philosophy. She is somehow at the ripe old age of 21, about to get her bachelor's and master's simultaneously. So yeah, Gabby, thank you for coming on to the very first podcast.
Yeah, I'm excited. Excited to be here. Excited to see you blossoming.
Oh, so
in
sweet.
This entrepreneurship of yours.
Yeah.
So thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So yeah, I think maybe let's just open things up by exploring what's going on for you right now. So some recent news is that you're about to get somehow your master's at the same time as your bachelor's.
Yeah, I mean, so I go to Naropa
What is
University. Naropa is a Buddhist-inspired university. Originated, from Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, who was a teacher from Nepal, and he came over and basically kickstarted this new wave of Buddhism in the U.S. really, and so that's kind of the wave that I was going towards after my freshman year of college at CU, and so I ended up there and wasn't feeling like the challenge that I wanted, and so. Yeah, I started taking a bunch of master's classes, and here we are.
So what are you studying at Naropa?
So I'm doing a double bachelor's in psychology and yoga, a minor in religious studies, and then I guess I'm getting an MA in yoga studies. That's pretty recent. So yeah.
So you said you started at CU, so Colorado University here in Boulder. What were you studying then, and kind of what made you want to switch to Naropa?
So I mean, I guess I'm used to thinking really hard. I think really hard about everything, and so that kind of pushed me into being infatuated with the unknown, and obviously with what's available in our modern education system, what the unknown is the universe, right? So I went into astrophysics and minored in philosophy. And then got tired of the robotics, switched to philosophy, and then hit mind body dualism and kind of realized how constructed our systems are based off of the Western philosophies.
So mind body dualism, can you explain what that is?
Yeah, I mean, it originates from Descartes. It's this the notion of, if you've ever heard I think, therefore I am. So it's kind of this reductionist approach to everything, really. And there's a lot of influence from the church, in these different philosophies. And so that kind of, took me other places. I was wanting to expand in different ways that eventually led me to Eastern esoteric traditions, Yeah.
So again, just to kind of explore what you said, because I think you said a lot. So mind-body dualism is an idea from Descartes, one of the great thinkers of our time. And basically that's saying that the mind and the body are separate.
Yeah.
And so how did that influence you?
Well, there's just so much integration that the mind and the body have, right? I mean, when you really, really discover your own inner psychologies, the ways that your awareness works, and kind of meditative practices, these different outlets that we have that are becoming more and more popular, that allow us to explore the notion of self. What does that mean? As I went through that process of being a heavy meditator and then studying these different traditions, these different philosophies, I realized that there's actually a lot more connection than most people talk about. Like my entire mental framework, the ways that I'm thinking, the ways that I'm feeling, is going to directly affect my physical world. And for me, it was my physical body, like constantly competing. And I think competing was a big integration of that larger aspect for me, you know, like pushing the body to the limit and then seeing how the mind actually influences the ways that we think that we're limited. So what is my maximum capacity? How far can I run? How long can I run? And can I go further? Yeah. Right? Yeah. And then once I go further, I realize that my own construction of how far I can go is the reason why I'm limited to that.
So yeah, you said a lot of great things there. First of which is, again, how linked the mind and the body are. Although we've been conditioned to kind of believe in a certain narrative that is, oh, they're separate. I have my thoughts in my head and the feelings in my body. But actually, what you're saying is that when you really dig deep, and I think everyone actually already knows this, the mind and the body can be seen as one system. And what is going on in the mind is affecting what's going on in the body. And in, you know, especially spiritual circles, people talk about dis-ease. So dis-ease in the mind, when I'm not in this place of contentedness, when there's this unhealthy amount of stress, it affects the body. It affects the immune system. It affects the nervous system. It affects also performance. So like you said about running, and I run ultras, I run distance, I have been for a while. And it's so interesting because you can push yourself farther than you think. When at first you say, oh, like an ultra marathon, 50K, like that's pretty far. And I tell people about it and they're like, oh, how'd you do that? And I'm like, it's literally one foot in front of the other. It's not that bad. And what? It's just pain. Your feet hurt. You got, you know, chafing in your armpits and your taint. Like it's not glamorous, but it really is like, if you create that limit in your mind where I say that I can't run an ultra marathon. That's just not me. When we say that, you're the creator. And yeah, you can't, or it's going to be really, really hard. And it makes me think of also, I think it's when someone started to shatter the 5 or 4 minute mile, whatever it is, all of a sudden, everyone's able to do it. All of a sudden, tons of people are shattering that perceived limitation of the human body. So really, if the mind is not creating the glass ceiling, and I want to emphasize it's a glass ceiling, then what can we do? Where is the limit? And
yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's asking, how am I placebo affecting myself, right? And how can I do that in a way that is beneficial? You know, there's an analogy I like to use, especially when talking about running. This is the example that we're using. It takes a long time to get out of the mind. And what I mean by this is, when does the drop-in happen? When does the break happen that allows for the easefulness to set in and for this kind of plateauing of the constructs that we're stuck in to happen? And I like to see it as a wheel. Like you spin the wheel. You're constantly spinning the wheel when you're interacting with people, when you're, you know, moving through your life and, you know, have schedules and things that you need to pay attention to. It's like we're constantly spinning this wheel. And it takes a while once we're in these places of, whether it's in a contemplative space, whether it's pushing the physical body, whether it's some kind of meditation, we actually stop spinning the wheel, but there's a certain amount of momentum that needs to burn before it slows. Yep. And so that's the way that I've really learned that how to work with that mind-body connection. And then also, I mean, in terms of, you know, some of these Eastern traditions in this context, the mind, the conceptual mind and the body are actually one. And that is its own entity, right? And then the self, the consciousness behind that is another thing, right? That aren't separate, that intertwine, but there is this difference, you know? Yeah.
What I'm familiar with is this notion of what's called the chitta. I think that's a Pali word, which is heart mind. So in Buddhism, that's how I know that word. Bodhicitta, the awakened heart mind. It's actually one thing. So your mind and your heart are not separate. It's the chitta. And that's a very different, again, experience conceptually that then gets, again, projected onto our world. Where when Descartes, again, mind-body dualism is a world we're living in. We see the mind up here and the body here. And there's that separation, that disconnect. And ultimately, I think there's pros and cons to both of those perspectives, right? But I want to bring it back to the limitations that we can put on ourselves and the lack thereof. If we really believe if we really believe in ourselves, if we really believe in the creator, creation, if we really have faith, what is possible? When we're not saying, oh, but that's not possible. People can't walk on water. People can't levitate. No, that's just not possible. Well, if you say so, and I really am curious about how deep that goes, because it's culturally conditioned, and it's not just in, physical endurance where we're limiting ourselves.
Yeah.
Can I succeed academically, professionally? Can I talk to that chick or dude or whatever somebody's into, but also really, where is the limit? Is there one? Is there a limit that exists beyond the one that I make for my story, for my life? How great do I want to be? And I think this is a question that not a lot of people ask.
Yeah.
How great do I want to be in this one life I'm given? And recognize there's no limits. There's no limits. So really, who do you want to be?
Yeah.
And so many people are limiting themselves by saying, oh no, that's just not me. I'm just going to find a decent job, have good job security, find a good enough partner, and we're just going to call it a life. And for some people, that image, that narrative, that archetype really of the normal dude, that's enough. They're fulfilling that archetype, and that's beautiful. But for some of the beautiful tortured souls that can never get enough, there again is never enough. And we're constantly striving for what is greatness? What does that mean to me? And what is in the way of that? And how do I get that shit out of here? And then we can work. I see it as from two angles, really, from the top down. So we can work with our mind and understand, where are my limiting beliefs? Where are my limiting assumptions? What narratives am I holding on to too tightly, conscious or unconscious? That might be, again, making my life not what I want. Versus we can also act from the bottom up, where we start to work with the body, we start to work with the feelings and start to feel contraction somatically. And can I open to this? Can I loosen that tightness in my chest, in my throat, that worry, that anxiety? Can I love those experiences to death? And I don't know if we want to talk about this right now. This is going into pretty deep waters as far as how the mind is constructing experience.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, where I would take that in a more practical manner would be, there are two different things that popped up for me. One of them is, say you're on your deathbed, right? And you're presented with the question of, what would make you feel closure? What needs closure?
Yeah.
And, we can get into all of these intricate, philosophies and this and that and this tradition, but really, like, what is it in your life that you need closure with, and what is it that you wish that you did? I think those are the fundamental questions that you should ask. How are you not loving and living fully?
Yeah. And
in that, we can explore the landscape of emotion and how intimate you are with it, and
intimate with
your emotions. And what I mean by this is, asking these questions, how have I constructed a limitation around my ability to feel emotions?
Whoa.
Like, say the emotion of love, right? Like, for me, that is what literally penetrates everything, is love. But what are the ways that I think love feels? What are the ways that I think it looks like, and how it should sound, and how I should act when I am in the place of love, when others are expressing love to me? We have these limiting constructions of how we think emotions are supposed to look and feel and express.
Yeah.
When really that's completely false. And so by going into that, by exploring that, we can actually realize and discover this much, much more enriching, vast, open experience. But in order to do so, there has to be a certain amount of courage to know that when you're going into the exploration of an unbounded emotion, it's going to be difficult. And you're going to be changed. You're going to be moved by the depths of life, you know?
So you said a couple of really awesome things, I think. And first being, what do you need to do? What do you need to accomplish? Who do you need to be comfortable with the life that you lived? when you die. And actually, we could die tomorrow. So really, now's the time. But so that's a huge question. And I want to open it up to you, actually, to be a little more personal with that. What do you want? And then I would love to tap into that opening to love, deeper emotional, really expansiveness after that. But right now, yeah, what do you want? What do you need to do, accomplish? Who do you need to be in order to die complete?
All right, Benjamin. Put it back over here.
Just easy questions all day.
What do I need to do? Of course I could say, yeah, I want to get this PhD and I want to travel here and I want to live in this place and study from this person. And what I will say I don't want to do is to be enlightened.
You don't want to be enlightened.
I don't want to be enlightened in the ways that have been described. And maybe that's a little rebellious of me, but...
Can you just explain what enlightenment means to you? Or what it is,
Enlightenment to me is seeing the most essential nature of reality. And what reality is, that's a rabbit hole that I'm sure we'll get into sometime.
Yeah.
But it's an intimacy, but in the ways that it has been presented, especially in the traditions that I'm studying, I don't know if I agree with. I would much rather be in the richness and in the intensity of what it means to be living this human experience, but doing so in an enlightened way, changing the noun to a verb. You know, like I'm consistently enlightening, becoming. There's this becoming aspect. I am becoming. I am not going to become. So when you're asking me, like, what is it? What do I want? What would bring me closure? It would be to live that becoming in the most full way, in the deepest way, and to have relationships that are absolutely out of this world, and to create things that spark this flame and that ripple out to others. Because as long as I am being in that truth, as long as I am being in that potency, I will change the world. The world will change. Yeah. It is a ripple effect. Yeah. And so I think that that's something that is really important to arrive at. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Yeah. I think, this notion of enlightenment, which if you're not familiar with that term, is basically the goal of the Buddhist path, the end of suffering and liberation from samsara, the cyclical wheel of suffering. So there's actually not just one enlightenment. There's, at least in Buddhism, there's three major schools: Theravadan, Mahayana, and Vajrayana, the tantric school. And they all have different paths and different notions of what the end of the path would look like. So, I mean, I can just run through them. Theravadan Buddhism, which is, again, like Thai, Southeast Asian Buddhism nowadays, the original tradition of the Buddha. The goal of that is to be free of suffering through letting go of desire, which is beautiful, right? There's something so radical that happens when you can really let go of everything you ever wanted.
And it's a lot more self-oriented, right?
It's just self-focused. It's very individually focused. And I will say in my own life, I've actually walked each of these paths. And when I've been on the Theravadan path, it started because I was really depressed and anxious and confused and like, what the fuck is going on here? What do I do? What's worth doing? And I just needed a respite from life, from my own mind. So really letting go of desire, and in very deep ways, letting go of success, letting go of trying to be somebody, letting go of trying to be liked even. These are very deeply rooted things that we hold on to. So when we let go of them for maybe the first time in our lives, it can be like, oh my God, I didn't know I could feel this good. But for me, that enlightenment evolved, that flavor of freedom, and enlightenment, who knows? We'll talk to some monks and see what they think at some point. But I will say that I was able to taste something really profound. And this was when I was in India and traveling at Zen centers, just really let go. And then I moved into this point where actually, I mean, the story is I was living at a Zen center in New Mexico. I wanted to do another retreat, so I came to the Rocky Mountain Eco Dharma Center up here by Boulder. And they did a retreat where it was like 4 days of sitting and then like 3 or 4 days of a, like basically you're just camping in the woods, kind of like Vision Quest type deal. And at that time, I'd been traveling for 2 years in India and at Zen centers in the States or other spiritual communities. And I hadn't been doing any psychedelics, any substances. I was completely sober for a couple of years. And at that point, my buddy actually had given me a gift of like 5 grams of mushrooms. And I just had them for like 2 years. And I was like, I don't know what I want to do. Do I go back to the Zen center? Well, like, what do I do with my life? I don't know. So I was like, maybe now's the time to just eat those mushrooms. So I did this retreat in the middle of the summer in the Indian Peaks, basically. So gorgeous part of Colorado. And I'm camping by myself. First, we start with like 4 days of sitting. So lots of meditation. Then I'm in the woods alone. And I also decided to fast. So I was like, fuck it. I'm just going to drink water, no food. And so I'm out there solo starving. And I was like, day 4, I'm going to eat these mushrooms. So day 4 on a fast in the middle of the woods by myself after 4 days of meditation.
It's a total Duff move, by the way.
It is a total Duff move. If you don't know, you're going to learn. But so I ate 5 grams of mushrooms on a 4-day fast. And it was insane. If you've ever eaten 5 grams of mushrooms, especially on an empty stomach, it hits. So I had this really profound experience where I realized this whole spiritual journey I'd been on for years of like, where is truth? Where is enlightenment? How do I get free of this suffering? It finally dawned on me. There's just like this knowing like, oh yeah, all of this is for you. And it's in a sense kind of selfish. It's just all about you. It's all about your freedom, your liberation, your peace of mind. And there's a place for that, right? But then there's another place to evolve beyond that. And this moves into the Mahayana Buddhist notion of the bodhisattva ideal. So bodhisattva is basically an individual who takes a vow to serve the world so that they're not really deeply free until the whole world is first.
Across incarnations.
Across time and space, which is profound and deep. And I won't go into that too much, but I wasn't too familiar with that ideal at some point. I was a little bit, but it was just a very obvious knowing of maybe the path for me now is just give. It's like what happens when you can start to live in service to others, when it's not all about you, when we actually loosen the contraction of the solidity of this self and we start to give selflessly. There's a freedom that you can only get through service. Only. No matter how much you let go of desire, no matter how much money you have, great vacations, dope experiences, intimate partners, nothing can really touch the levity that comes when you're really living a life in service. And the way I put it is like you hold the door for somebody, you do something nice, you smile at somebody.
Well, and that service can bleed into all of those different realms that you just named.
Yeah, you know? and exactly, I'll get there. So I was on this tripping balls on 5 grams of mushrooms, and this dawned on me. It was like, yeah, I've just been all about me. How do I give? And at this point, I really had realized I'd come to some really profound understandings and insights, things that had dramatically changed my life from being really depressed. And people see me now. They see the Duff Daddy image on the internet. They're like, oh, this dude's probably just been like this forever. And what they don't understand is actually I'm coming from a place of a lot of pain and suffering. I was so depressed earlier in my life, like in undergrad, that I couldn't go out. I was just eating and sleeping. I was so dissociated because I hated myself so much. People would speak to me and I couldn't even answer them. I didn't even know what they said. And people they just don't assume that was a period of my life. But it's that pain that has led me to these understandings. And I'm so unbelievably thankful for that. So it was, again, leading me to this path of service where then I was like, I guess I'll get my master's and become a therapist. At that point in my life, it seemed like that's a great way to help people. That's interesting because I found that psychotherapy is limited in actually the way that it can address the human mind, suffering, and really in the ways that therapy can open to the infinite degree of human potential that we all have access to, where Buddhism is much more open. Buddhism, not as a dogmatic religion, but as a path to understand reality in your mind. And so then I found the Bodhisattva ideal. And I'll give you an opening here because I've just been riffing hard. But yeah, we can talk about how then that bleeds into the Tantric, the Tibetan Vajrayana school of Buddhism. But
yeah, I guess you have me thinking about my crazy solo backpacking experiences. And something that I've always arrived at, no matter how many different places I go to study these deeper traditions, if I can't arrive at my innermost faith by being in the natural world, by being in living experience and watching this notion of self and who I am dissolve and re-solidify in this oscillation. If I can't find that in the natural world and arrive at that and then maybe take that into a more dogmatic application, then I don't want it. And that's what I appreciate about Buddhism, is that Buddhism is something that you can arrive at with being in your own experience and having to confront the intensity. And that confrontation allows you to unwind and disassemble what it is that you think you are, who it is that you think you are, and how you think you need to be in the world. And yeah, and starting, I mean, that it does really start in that Theravadan landscape of making it about you, because there is no liberation of other without liberation of self, right? And so it's this unwinding that is happening that we're seeing within this tradition, but that actually has a more foundational root within all of humanity and how we can relate to each other. So there's that unwinding of the self, that Theravada, and the Mahayana is the service. I'm in service to others. And what came up for me when you were talking about that was I love, more than I love studying the divine, I love to watch those who are worshipers, those who create. There is no divine without the people who spark the light of God. We create God.
Boom.
And so I bow to those who worship and to the God, but realize that is created from us. And that deeply reflects our own abilities, our own inner God-like sense. You know what I mean? And so that's the Mahayana for me, right? That's what I really discovered. And, Tantra, Vajrayana Buddhism is really learning how to be in life by entertaining that which you desire. Entertaining the things that are tasteful, right? And having enough practice, having enough awareness that there is a certain amount of separation, but realizing that there are ways, and this is more, maybe I'm having a more yogic perspective on this, but there are ways to find this road towards a more liberative experience by entertaining all these different places, whether it's renunciation or whether it's I'm going to go out and I'm going to treat myself and I'm going to be in those, richness. Yeah.
So I'm going to stop you there. Yeah. Because you just said so many really potent, deep things. And one that's popping out to me is this notion that God or gods might be constructed. Might be constructed by who? By us as individuals and as a collective. And the question is, the question of the millennia is whose God is really real. and this is, a question that has led to the death of millions of people easily, and a lot of violence, pain, suffering.
And the construction of a lot of things, systems.
And of a lot of oppressive systems sometimes. But for me, recognizing that, like you said, we are creators in every sense. In a non-dual perspective, and non-duality is a school of Eastern philosophy. Advaita Vedanta is one of the most well-known schools that says there is not two. You can't say there's one because that also implies a zero. It's just non-dual. So all is, you could say one, all is interconnected, the same. And that means God and human is a non-dual relationship. And recognizing that maybe we are creators in the deepest sense. And like we started this conversation with limitations or the lack thereof, we can construct limitations. We can construct freedom from limitations. We can construct gods, goddesses, heaven on earth. We can construct hell on earth for ourselves as well. It's a high risk, high reward kind of game. And the primary delusion that Buddhism talks about is we think that the world is out there and I'm just walking through it. And we're forgetting that we're actually playing a inseparable role in creating it. We are constructing this world, whether it's a world full of, the Hindu gods, or the one God in Christianity or Judaism, or the atheistic perspective where there is no such thing. All that there is matter, and science is what's real. No matter what belief you have, if you really believe it, if you know it to be true, you are going to project that constructed world onto this blank canvas here. And we can make it anything we want. And this is what really gets me off, because we can create, again, hell on earth. And you could say that we've been doing that for quite a while, because the tendency of the mind is to focus on what we don't have, the things that are missing, all the fear, the not knowing. That's just a tendency of the mind to get hooked on those things. Mm-hmm. So then we focus on the scary shit, and we're constructing hell on earth. And we can actually choose consciously a different story, a different understanding of reality, where this place is dripping in divinity. I have a very real, direct relationship with God and creation. We can start to enchant our identity, what we are as maybe not just human beings, but maybe angels. Maybe we are deities right now, incarnate, and who's to say we're not? Ultimately, the Buddhists would say they're all empty ideas. Just because you experience yourself to be a human being doesn't mean it's objectively real. It means that's a story that you're inhabiting right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the question is, how can I remystify the mundane by demystifying the constructions of the divine?
Say that again and break it down.
All right. So how can I remystify the mundane? How can I construct my own narrative, the story that I'm living? Because if that's true, if we're going to unwind the notion of God, how can I be selectively constructing my own reality, my own narrative, and live an archetype that I desire, live the story that I want to, by this is the remystification. This is waving the magic wand and saying, actually, that's not how it is. Actually, let me play. Even if you don't believe it, if this isn't something that rings true to you, even if you just play with it. Yeah. Like, okay, I'm going to walk out in the world, and I think that I'm going to construct the narrative that I'm the philosopher, see what happens, see who you run into, what stands out to you, and how are you plucking that to further that narrative? And how can you be aware of that to discerningly construct your own reality? Yeah. And that is the remystification of the mundane. But that has to come from an unwinding of what we have perceived and constructed as divine. The demystification of these hierarchical landscapes of what God and divine is. Yeah.
And so just to kind of reflect what I'm hearing from you is that we can try on, the word that came to me is archetypes, different imaginal experiences of who we are, and actually also what the world is. These are imagined archetypal experiences. And we can be, like you said, the philosopher, we can be the lover, we can be the warrior, we can be the artist, we can be the magician. All of these archetypes, we're actually already living them, but we don't think that we're engaging in more of an archetypal practice. We think that's who I am. And that's where, when we start to understand, oh, maybe I'm actually channeling an imaginal archetype. And this is rooted in depth psychology, archetypal psychology, the work of Carl Jung, James Hillman, who I draw on a lot, recognizing that you could make the argument that all we are is living, breathing archetypes, that we are a meeting point for different imaginal images to just flow through us. And different archetypes and images, again, like you said, lead to different experiences. They attract different things. You carry yourself differently when you're the lover versus the warrior, right? And you attract different people, and you attract different experiences. And what's so potent for me is when you blend this archetypal exploration and archetypal practice with one of the core understandings in the Buddhist tradition, which is the fundamental emptiness of everything that is, of all experience. And this is basically the crux of the whole tradition. So it can be difficult to explain. I think I'm pretty decent at it. We're basically saying everything that you are, the world that you're experiencing, the narrative about the events in your life, even life itself, is a conceptual experience and thus not inherently real. So when you recognize any sense of self that I could ever inhabit, that I could ever think that I was, is actually empty of inherent existence. meaning that for this sense of self to exist, it's depending on your mind, your concepts. And those concepts are fluid. They can be literally one of millions of things, or maybe infinite things. And at that point, you realize, wait, what's the real me? Is it when I'm the lover, the warrior? Is it when I'm depressed? Is it when I'm not depressed and everyone likes me? Is it when I'm killing the game? Is it when I get fired from my job and think I'm a loser? Who's the real me? Mm-hmm. And if you actually spend time with that question, and it's a painful question for the ego that is clinging to some solid way that I am, because the ego is inherently, the ego meaning this sense of a separate self that we are conditioned to believe. That's what I am. I'm Ben, the human, and I'm separate from everybody else. That ego is actually trying to cling to and construct some sense of solidity where I'm objectively a winner or I'm objectively a loser. And a lot of people get stuck in either of those narratives. And emptiness just kind of teaches, oh, you're only what you say that you are. All that you've ever been is only what you believe that you are. And from that place, can we channel archetypes at will? Not opening up to what I am objectively, what I am beyond my mind, but actually using the mind to say, who do I want to be right now? Who do I want to be today? Again, how great do I want to be? Can I channel not just archetypes as in, the warrior, the lover, the artist, but can I channel beings in the past that have really influenced us and our world? Can I channel the Christ? Can I channel Buddha? Can I channel Mark Twain? Can I channel all of these different people that have made an impact on me? How would I act if I was, again, the whole thing, what would Jesus do? You could make the argument that that's an archetypal practice, actually. Because this being called Jesus, called Christ, at this point only exists in the realm of the imaginal. And different Christian traditions have a different imaginal experience of what the Christ is. Just like different schools of Buddhism have a different imagined experience of what the Buddha is. It's all in your mind. So at that point, we can open to really what I think is the will of creation itself, to construct itself and to construct worlds without binding ourselves to one way that we are the world is. So at that point, you're open up to something very mystical. Who wants to channel this archetype? Who has the desire to be that great? Whose desires are they? Because when you're not Ben, Gabby, in the solid sense, when we loosen that, again, fabricated identity a little bit, who is speaking right now? Whose desires are these? It's an open question, and we can start to really trust that and flow with everything that's coming through us, where how would I carry myself if I was, again, the Christ, Buddha, if I was really a warrior? And we can start to become what, honestly, source, creation wants us to be, without saying, oh, but that's not me. I don't know.
And I can't do it, and I'm not enough.
Exactly. Yeah. Limitations.
Yeah, and I think, taking this practically now, like how... I think being able to arrive at this flexibility, this malleability of archetype, we have to be able to see what we're living first.
Totally.
Like to give enough space, just enough space to look at how am I limiting myself? What am I constructing for myself? How would you say, what would you say the best method, practical way to go about that is?
I think, so again, practically, thank you for taking it there, because all these conceptual ideas are meaningless unless you can practice them and make them a reality. So I would say I break it up into 3 steps, which is the first step is, you could say just mindfulness, becoming aware of what is the story that I'm living in. Or you could rephrase it, what is the story of my life? When I say the story you're living in, it's a little bit looser because we recognize it's a story. It's a fantasy. And there is no story of you that is not going to be a fantasy. So understanding what is my story right now? My story of who I am, my story of the past, maybe traumas, maybe the fact that I didn't get the parents that I wanted, I didn't get the childhood that I wanted. What's my story around that? What's my story around the future? Is it going to be, apocalyptic wasteland? Are we getting nuked next year? Are the aliens landing? Which I would love to talk about. What's my imagined fantasy of my past, my future, and actually what's my fantasy of right here in the present? And just asking that. And a lot of these narratives, these stories can be so subtle.
So I'm curious, like, what about somebody who's in deep, deep, crippling grief?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
What, like calling that a fantasy, right?
Mm-hmm.
When it's so embodied and when it's so, like, heavy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so here we go. Now we're moving
into
the realm of what's called dependent origination in Buddhism. So basically, you would say that people living in a very painful experience are experiencing a very high degree of contraction, actually. Contraction meaning we could call it resistance, or clinging, and aversion is the word that they use in Buddhism. But basically, this resistance is constructing experience. It's constructing our perceived solidity of reality. So interestingly, we could say when we resist an experience, when we resist our sense of self, when we resist the world, that resistance is actually solidifying that trauma, that sense of self, as something inherently real. And it becomes very tight and contracted. So someone in a lot of grief from this lens would actually be in what we could call sort of a spasm, like a cramp in the psyche, where we tighten around maybe I hate my life, or my ex cheated on me and I'm not good enough, something very painful. The psyche contracts around it. And when the psyche contracts in pain, we're actually constructing something that is worth resisting, because the tightness, the resistance is what's painful. And then we have something that seems very real that we can resist even more. So people get stuck in this sort of feedback loop of resistance, where we resist and thus we solidify. And when we solidify, we have something that appears objectively real that we can resist even more. So it turns into this really deep knot, this spasm, this cramp. So someone with a lot of, again, either trauma, grief, depression, anxiety, these are, from again the contemplative lens, these are contractions. So a way that people can start to get out of that experience is actually to start to resist less. And that seems like the last thing you want to do. The last thing I want to do is just allow my depression, is just allow my anxiety attacks, is just to allow this grief to take me over and cripple me. That seems like the last thing we want to do. But paradoxically, if we can open to the contraction, we can start to loosen it. And the way I see it is like there are knots in the psyche. So the tighter you pull these knots, the more you're resisting, the tighter and the more solid and real this event, this experience, a sense of self becomes. So when we can move into it with a relationship of love and openness, that actually stops the tightening, and we start to loosen these knots, where when we can really, and this is extremely difficult because this is the last thing you want to do, is just open to the pain, to the grief, to the sorrow, to the fear. But when we can do that, again, these knots start to loosen and these stories become much less solid and real. They become more malleable and flexible. And over time, with that relationship of really love, as opposed to fear and resistance, we can untie the painful stories about who we are, what we are, our painful stories about the trauma we experienced in the past, the painful, scary story about what we think the future is going to be. We can untie it all. And then we come to this really deep openness, which is profoundly beautiful, but that's not the end. Then we can reconstruct our story of self, our story of our past, our story of the future into something immensely beautiful, something enchanted, something dripping in divinity, connection, contentment, acceptance, unity. All of these things are possible, but it starts with really approaching the pain, the contraction, the resistance in our lives with that openness. And that's why I always say the spiritual path at its core is a warrior's path, because you're going towards the big scary monsters.
That's so interesting. And I mean, I don't know if I'm going to be going on a tangent here, but
please,
first of all, fire.
Thank you.
Snaps.
All day.
That was beautiful.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess that takes me into like my own, I guess, connection with the interspiritual realms.
Right? What does interspiritual mean?
So interspirituality, it's actually a newer term coined, and my identification of what interspirituality is we all have different hyphenated complex identities. Those are the stories, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those are the stories that we're so solid within. But the beauty of contraction, right? Contraction has intelligence, actually.
Yeah.
And being able to follow that is kind of the way to find this disentanglement. But by seeing the stories that we have around where we come from, how we relate with people, there's this complex identity that's created that draws us to different places, different traditions, naturally, that is looked down upon by, certain traditions. And so being able to bring that in, to reel that in into a place where we can actually explore these things without having attachment to, one, the stories of our hyphenated identities, and two, the stories of the religious context of where they come from, right? And so, I don't know, the interspirituality, I've always called it the path of the courageous heart, right? Because it's having an open dialogue with, can I relate with this way of seeing? And how can I do so in a way that is open and that will change me and that will expose me to different, archetypal ways of creating,
right?
And also ways of dealing with contraction that exist, if that makes sense.
So I'm hearing like an example of this would be if I was like a Christian, maybe actually opening to what is the Muslim faith like? And can I let that actually touch my heart? Because it's touched the hearts of millions. Billions. Yeah. And it's there's a reason for that. And so really not closing ourselves off from the poetry of all of these traditions. And the from the lens of emptiness, obviously, I look at all of the religious traditions as poetry. And it hits like that. Like it hits you in the soul. When you hear the words of Christ, when you read the Hindu epics, like it hits. And there's a reason they've lasted the test of time. And I think what you're pointing to with interspirituality is opening to really allow yourself to be impacted by the beauty of all of these traditions without, again, contracting around, oh, this one's real, this one's not. And falling for that same trap, which has, again, caused so much division in humanity for so long.
Yeah. And that's why, I think that dialogue, if we really come to understand what dialogue is, we can access all of these inner psychologies that we're speaking on and develop a more mature way of relating with others and relating with our world around us.
And I want to just extend this metaphor to a context beyond just religion, where we could say this tribal mentality of me versus you. My mentality is better than yours. My worldview is better than yours. We see this now in this age where religion has taken a step back for the majority of people, at least in the United States. And now we have these ideologies, which are politics, for instance, which is now the ideology we kill each other over, which is hilarious. Like, look at this whole Charlie Kirk situation. It's these people that are like, I'm right, you're wrong, duh. Obviously, you're an idiot. You're what's wrong with the country. And it's the same shit as the Christians and the Muslims in the Crusade. Different image, different story, different context, but it's this tribal mentality where we're unable to open to a different perspective. And what is causing that is actually contraction. It's fear. Fear about, oh, that's the enemy. We need to make sure that we win and they lose, or else. Fear, 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 contract. And that contraction solidifies, I'm right, they're wrong. What happens if we're not afraid? And that's an open question. What happens if I'm not afraid of, the liberals or the Republicans taking over? What happens if I'm not afraid? How do I relate to them? How much love can I open in my heart? And how does that change the world?
Yeah. I can semi-answer that. Don't know if I'm really
please,
right.
Please.
What happens when you're not afraid? You're changed.
Changed in what way?
You're moved. You're moved by the experience.
Moved in what way?
It depends.
Yeah.
It depends. Where does it hit though? It obviously hits in the soul, in the place of where the ineffable self, right? But when we're when we're so wrapped up with these stories of fear and constructing, like, you know, I'm right, you're wrong, what is good and what is bad, and all of these different things, we actually limit ourselves from being able to experience fully. You know, like there's a crippling aspect. There's a hijacking of our own experience when we can't allow ourselves to see another. You know,
can you speak more to that?
You know, when we're having a conversation, right? If I am too wrapped up in what I want to say and I have no ability to bracket off my own inner dialogue, to be present with you and to hear you and to witness you, then that's an issue. And that is me furthering my own narrative, right? And one of the biggest yearnings of our species across time is to be witnessed. We want to be seen. That's the existential crisis. You know what I mean? So knowing that, how can I make myself so presenced that I am absorbed in the expression of the other, so much so that the self that I think is here is actually gone, you know? And I see it as my own form of expression. You know, and that's how you find all of these related places of humanity that live through and beyond tradition. And you know, in that, if you're so presenced, when it's your turn to express, it is completely spontaneous. It is completely new.
And that's what I've found with, I mean, speaking in general, like with the Instagram videos or just when I riff and, you know, it really hits, I'll find that I'm not trying to say anything. I don't write shit down. It's a matter of opening. I open to what's here. What is here? And let's just play with that. And that's the thing. It's really profound what can happen when we trust, when we open, when we, again, can trust what is coming through us. You might be surprised at what comes through you. Because again, that trust is actually an expansion. It's love. And that expansion allows the heart to open where the light can get through. And then, like I say, when you're really living in love, when you're really speaking from love, from your heart, who is speaking through you? Is it this contracted, delusional notion of Ben? And, you know, the ego, which is, again, constructed, not inherently real. Or is it something ineffable, something mysterious, something really mystical? And I think what can happen in life, more than just speaking, how do you carry yourself when you're living in love? Are you that guy who's going to jump on the grenade, you know, metaphorically and literally? And I was talking about this in a podcast I did the other day, but this notion of finding something to die for, to give this life to, how beautiful is that? And how much has humanity lost the connection with the beauty of that myth of finding something to die for, whether it's love? I mean, I would say it's always love in some form, whether it's a person, whether it's a culture, whether it's an idea that you love. And it doesn't have to be a physical death, but finding something to really dedicate your time and energy to so that you can enter the gates of Valhalla and feel fucking complete. And I think this circles back to what we were talking about. It's like, when you're on your deathbed, what do you have to do? Because do you want to be that person that looks back and say, fuck, I missed my chance. I missed it. And do you know how deeply would that hurt? How much would you have to distract, numb, and avoid when your soul is in that much pain? Because spirit is trying to live through us. And what does that mean? It's a question that each of us have to sit with. And it's inherently unpleasant when you don't know. But again, it's opening to that knowing, that not knowing with love, where you allow, I mean, you can call it God. Tends to be a tight word, but creation can then flow through you.
Well, and I think that's where the most gross, primal notion of faith comes from. You know, it doesn't have to have a deified reality to it. But where's the love? Where am I fearful of that love? And really, where am I seeing this delusion of separation? You know, like grief and love for me are the same. They're the same thing. One is just the illusion of separation that's present, right? And so if you can take that, say we're on our, like, you know, I'm on my deathbed. What is it that I am so resistant to that I can't just trust? That I can't just be faithful, whatever that means,
And trust again in your desires.
Yeah.
If you want to go travel in India, you want to go to Thailand, you want to quit your shitty job, you want to sail a sailboat across the country, you want to walk across the country, you want to leave the relationship, you want to make a change, what is stopping you from doing that? Is it some idea that I need security, I need money, I need this partner or else? Because where is that coming from? It's coming from fear. What happens if I take steps consistently into love? What would I do if I was really not afraid? How would I act? How deeply would I love? How deeply would I open? How deeply would I trust?
And that's where the fear comes from. That unbounded, expansive, ineffable space of potential.
And you spoke to something I think that's really potent, and we'll wrap it up in a minute, in 5 minutes-ish. But this connection between love and fear, or love and grief, excuse me. So grief, I've said this for a long time, love and grief are two sides of the same coin. So, and that is unfortunate to some people at first, but really it's something profoundly beautiful, where you could say that when I am in love with a person, with myself, with the world, with experience, it's going to have to end. And people don't want to recognize that, but so much freedom can come when you really spend time with that, knowing everything that you have ever loved, that you ever will love, will be taken from you, always. And that hurts. But it will always return to you in different forms, different faces, different places. And when we recognize that, we can trust. We can trust for love to come back to us. And then we can trust that it will have to leave someday. And that is going to hurt. With the high of love, the high of that connection, the high of that being seen, being heard, being felt. It feels so good that when it ends, that's going to hurt. And really, we have to ask ourselves, and this is different for everybody, is that okay? And how deeply do I want to soar? Do I want to fly? Do I want to fall in love, recognizing that when it ends, it's going to be equal and opposite grief? And it's a question for us. And there's no right or wrong. How deeply do we want to open? How deeply can we open to love? Recognizing that that provides us with some of the most meaningful, deep, profound experiences that make life worth living. And then again, let it go when it's time.
Absolutely. And I think that part of crossing that threshold is actually letting go of the notion that it will go away as well. Because we can get wrapped up in that so deeply of you're chilling on the beach and all you can think about is the fact that you have to go home and go to work.
Yeah.
Same thing with love.
Yeah.
Thinking about, oh man, is it going to end? Is this the time? That's what creates contraction. So, and then we have these little sparks of fear. So being really, really careful with that, And how can I go into this situation? Yeah, I'm gonna tread the lines of deep, deep, deep intimacy with love.
And also, like you said, there's a wisdom in contraction. There's a wisdom in fear. Because when we've been hurt, when our hearts have been stabbed through whatever, you get cheated on, somebody leaves you, whatever, your parents didn't treat you right. When there's that wound in the heart, naturally we protect it. And there's a wisdom in that. Because if you just keep your heart open and it's getting stabbed over and over again, bro, do something. Close that shit up. So there's a wisdom in, again, closing the heart. But the freedom comes from, can I choose to open my heart to certain people and certain experiences? And can I also choose to close my heart when it's not safe to keep it open? And obviously that's a pretty tricky discerning process. It's really a skill. And understanding also, we have very deep trauma a lot of the time. And trauma really is the word. And it can stem from when you're very young. And this is where we can call on attachment styles, where I have a certain wounded heart due to experiences I've had with the feminine. So it's hard. It's more difficult for me than I would say others to open my heart sometimes, where it's because I have these. And again, it's not even in my mind. It doesn't feel conceptual. You can make the argument that at a level it is, because it was a story that happened to me, but it could have happened to me when I was 6, 8 years old. And because this is, again, trauma is stored in the body, right? The body keeps the score. So it's this feeling of, oh, here's the depth, here's the intimacy that I actually deeply crave, but I don't trust. I know how this goes. And it's once I get that intimacy, I'm going to get stabbed in the heart. We got to get out of here. So there's these deeply seated, again, pain, trauma, contraction that, I mean, and I'm being vulnerable with, this is my own experience. And this is something that I've had to work with my whole life. And it's a double-edged sword, because some people can say, oh, you poor thing, you're so wounded. And I'm like, yeah, at one level, but also it's driven me to be the best fucking person that I can be, because I hated myself and I thought I was nothing. And now it's like the way that I look, the way that I speak, the way I engage with the world is as at the highest level I can possibly be. Why? Because I kind of hate myself. And I'll just end with, it's a joke that I say a lot of the time. But in order to be the best version of yourself, you kind of got to hate yourself just the right amount. And maybe hate's a strong word, but you got to know you can be better. And so, again, I just want to highlight the shadow side of those wounds as much as I want to highlight the light.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to recognize, when is this antidote that I have lived with used up?
Damn. Yeah.
You know?
It's an open question.
It's an open question.
Yeah. Well, Gabby, you are amazing. Thank you so much. This was sick. This is the first of many podcasts that we're going to be doing here, that we're going to be doing together, I'm sure. Again, this is the Duff Daddy podcast, Duff Daddy Experience. We'll find a name for it. But Gabby, do you have anything you want to end with? Maybe a shout out, your socials, if you want to
shout out my socials, GCE_Gabby, GABBI on the IG. Yeah. My podcast is called Spirit Meets Soil. Spotify, Apple Podcasts. I have a Substack. That's Gabriella Espinoza. I'll be on there. I do so many things. So if you find me somewhere, you'll see what's up. You know. I'm sure I'll be collabing again soon. Of course. So,
yeah, I would love to.
Appreciate you.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening. This is the first of many podcasts. So thank you.
Yeah.